Hi, thank you for the introduction. And it's so great to be with everyone today because I'm connected to everyone who's presenting. So I think it was 16 years ago, my colleague and I actually visited New York to get inspiration for food policy in the West Midlands in Birmingham. And then I'm currently supporting Tirana through this Horizon 2020 project that you just mentioned. And also, I used to visit Mark Talanoin every year. And so I know that this was a grocer's before. And it was just so wonderful to see 2 weeks ago that it's been converted into a training center for public sector caterers in Berlin. And yeah, so it's just wonderful to be presenting here. So I'm going to share my screen, and unfortunately, that means that I won't be able to see you all. So just bear with me, and I'm going to try my hardest to stick to the time that I've been given. So I'm going to do something slightly different. I know that the focus of your interests is public sector procurement, but the focus of my work has been advising cities across Europe and further afield, so India, which is where my parents are from, even though I was born in the UK, and Africa, to develop food strategies that are going to lead to food systems transformation. And so so we know Berlin is a capital, New York is like one of the most important cities in the world and has inspired us. And how do secondary cities or smaller cities get involved in developing food strategies and implementing transformational changes? I want to take you through the journey that my city, which is where I was born, took, and also think about the lessons that we've learned. And then it would be great. I'm sure that there are experts in the audience in Berlin and elsewhere who can say, well, actually, this is what you need to think about. And it will be great to learn from yourselves about how we can support this transition to healthier, sustainable food systems. So I was commissioned by Birmingham in 2014 to start supporting them as a public health nutritionist on tackling the obesity crisis. But I would say that the journey actually started at the turn of the century when the then Labour government started investing a lot of money into communities, and some directors of public health, which were leading the food policy movement in the UK, were saying we need to start thinking about how we're going to support communities to make healthier, sustainable food choices. Post 2008, 2009 crisis, councils faced significant budget cuts, but the commitment to tackling obesity remained high on the agenda. And I was lucky because our director of public health was moving away from the idea that individuals or people were responsible for being obese, and was saying that actually, you know what? It's the environment that we need to tackle. We need to think about what's going on in the environment and we need to do something about it. So just to set the scene, and I mean, you'll come back to this later, I hope, but these kind of statistics, the next 3 slides are statistics that the Public Health Department have produced, demonstrate the kind of challenges and the opportunities that cities across Europe and further afield face when we're trying to tackle health inequalities. And that's the thing that really is close to my heart. And even though I did do German at school, I could just about recognize that that health inequalities was mentioned. I think that was probably because it was in English. But you can see here that for communities in cities like Birmingham, one of our biggest issues is that there's almost a decade indifference when it comes to healthy life expectancy. And most countries want to make sure that everyone has an equal chance of having a great life. And that includes my city. I have to say that I'm showing you the 2018 to 2022 statistics. I don't know if you've heard on the news, but Birmingham is now in a lot of trouble. And that reflects a lot of other local authorities and cities in the UK. But again, expecting cities to do so much on limited budgets is something that we need to think about. So even though we have great case studies, like I work with Copenhagen too, not all cities are able to invest in transitions. So we need to think about where will that investment come from, dietary transitions, that is. Luckily enough, when I was starting out, we were already thinking about a systems approach. So before we started thinking about a food systems approach, a professor at City University called Professor Tim Lang led the Foresight report. And this showed that tackling obesity, which is a form of malnutrition, so undernutrition or underweight is obviously considered a malnutrition, but we also have to think about overweight and obesity as a form of malnutrition. Just because you're getting excess calories doesn't mean that you have access to good, nutritious food. So this incredible study took place, and we began to realize that the problem is not just about the fact that people are over consuming food, it's due to a number of factors. And we need to consider lots of levers to enable healthier, more sustainable food choices. Okay, I'm using the word sustainability, and maybe that came a little bit later, but so after 2010. But even then, we were thinking about the kind of actions that are considered sustainable today. So Birmingham last year launched the Birmingham Food Revolution. And I just want to take you through the journey that led to this. So we now have a comprehensive strategy, a food strategy, which spans the entire food supply chain. So it's not just about promoting 5 a day, which is the kind of thing that I would have focused on 2 decades ago as a public health nutritionist, or the Eat Well Guide, which were our national dietary guidelines. And by the way, congratulations, Germany, for having a food strategy and thinking about their dietary guidelines. That was launched, I think, in the past couple of weeks. So this is the journey that we took place. I mentioned in 2014, we started thinking about tackling the obesogenic environment. In 2015, like Berlin, we signed the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact. And I just want to emphasize that because we're not a capital city, we're not a major city, our director of public health, and public health had moved into the local authority or the local government, he himself thought, actually, we need to sign this. So if the original, the early adopters were all the major cities of the world, we signed the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, and it gave us an insight into what the food system actually means. In 2016, so a year later, we received recognition for our efforts to tackle childhood obesity because the pact had launched an award system. So they had a major award recognizing one city for the amazing things they were doing in relation to the food system, but they also had kind of like recognition awards for cities that were doing things in relation to governance, food governance, equity, and in our case, it was sustainable diets and nutrition. And it was only when I was preparing this presentation that I thought, wow, it's the kind of the decision makers that were already thinking ahead of their time, that they actually were thinking that we need to tackle the obesogenic environment. This meant things like asking developers to contribute funds to creating healthier environments, thinking about advertising and nutrition profiling on food-related advertisements. Other cities have restricted junk food advertising. Giving communities funds to set up their own interventions. So what is it that communities need to make healthier food choices? And so we were experimenting, and actually what the director of public health, Adrian Phillips, said to me at the time was that nothing is working. So just experiment, see what could work. And that was quite an amazing thing to be able to think about. Because of the international forum, we are an international city. Nearly 50% of the population in Birmingham has heritage from all over the world. So there are hundreds of languages spoken here. And I think by the next decade, we will be a majority minority city, is what they called. They call it. So what we did was decide that we would partner with a city in India, and we launched the Birmingham Indian Nutrition Initiative, which may sound really peculiar, but there is a big diaspora community which stems from the Commonwealth, the colonial past, from the Caribbean, Africa, and Asia. And we thought that we could learn together, that we could influence one another, and it worked really well. And the one thing that we learned from India was their ability to engage citizens at scale, which we are restricted actually. And in the run up to the pandemic, we expanded this partnership to involve more cities. And then we launched a program called Food Cities 2022. And there were more cities in Africa and Asia joining this program. And it also helped us think about our own food strategy, which, following political commitment, was launched last year and was launched in 2022 and went out to consultation and was ratified by our political cabinet last year. So there are 6 work streams spanning the entire food supply chain, reflecting how complex food systems are, and stakeholders are engaged around each of the work streams and will be developing an action plan. So there is one specifically focused on procurement as well. So I just wanted to give you an example of some of the activities that were delivered. So we call them food policy actions in kind of like academic jargon in the run up to the launch of the strategy. So as well as the policy levers that we explored at the beginning, we delivered citizen engagement activities. And one of these was conducting food focus groups with seldom heard voices. So those communities in our city that we never consult, who are not going to go online and respond to government consultations. There was also an online food survey, which wasn't there wasn't mass participation. Our population is 1.2. Maybe we had 300 respondents, but it still gave us some insight. And we were also the site of the national food conversation. So you in Germany now have a national food strategy. Unfortunately, our government didn't adopt the recommendations proposed by the national food strategy that they commissioned. But the good thing for us is that the national food strategy launched its conversation with the public and stakeholders whilst it was being developed. We have a healthier food forum, which is basically like a food policy council. And we've also been part of Sustainable Food Cities, which go ahead and look at in the UK. You can see Bristol and Brighton achieved a gold award for all of the sustainable food related actions that they've been delivering. We scaled up food aid during the pandemic by working with stakeholders. And I really believe that wouldn't have been possible if we hadn't been working on this agenda. We are now steering group members of the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, and this is our 2nd term. And I already mentioned the Food Cities 22 project. In the past year, so this is in 2 years alone, other activities have included adapting the national guidelines to be culturally sensitive. So as I said, we've got such a diverse community, but do nutrition and diet guidelines actually reflect the needs of our communities? We've launched, as part of Food Trails, the EU Horizon 2020 project that we've been part of, the Full of Beans campaign, and this is supporting the protein transition. So even though there's been backlash by farmers, this has been prompted by the EU's Food 2030 agenda, and many of the other cities have also been doing very similar campaigns. We've been sponsoring creative dinners, and there have been various PhDs and intensive research led by Cambridge University into Birmingham's food system. And we also had a food team recruited which is probably one of very few food teams in the UK who are totally and utterly responsible for not just developing the food strategy, making sure that it's being implemented. And so the 3 pillars of the food strategy focus on the environment, communities, and the economy. And the regenerative word, which in agricultural terms means one thing, here means regenerating not just the environment, but also the communities and economy. And so I would say, just as I've got 1 minute left, the key lessons learned from our point of view as not a major city, but a city that really wants to do something about its food system, is to start by addressing local challenges. And in our case, it was trying to address obesity, which was important to politicians. Engaging in international networks led to us securing political commitment that demanded not only that we produce a strategy during the pandemic, but we also invest in a food team. So the food team is comprised of 5 full-time professionals. And as I mentioned, convening stakeholders and engaging citizens is really important. I think, having worked with a number of cities, the challenge is actually going beyond the convening and really taking what people are saying and implementing it into action. And so here I've just mentioned that a framework for urban food governance has been written by some leading academics who've been working on food systems for a number of years. And they talk about how we can really check and question ourselves, because we're all passionate, you're all passionate, but how is that passion, how does it matter to other people? And are other people being impacted by the changes that we're trying to implement? So I've made a reference there and I urge everyone to look at it. So now, even though I've been a consultant at Birmingham City Council for all of this time, but I'm also working with international organizations, and we're really, because we're approaching 2030, we're really thinking about what does transformation look like. And so some of the cities I've worked with are listed here. And what I am beginning to think about is, how do we encourage cities to do all of this at the same time? And that requires some really intensive work, and also some national dialogue and international dialogue, as well as advocacy around economics and so on. And yeah, so it would be great to also hear from yourselves in relation to that, if you've got any thoughts. And I think I'm 2 minutes over, sorry. I would love to hear from you if you've got any thoughts. And I'm really into the idea of new thinking rather than repetitive thinking, as the world is changing so rapidly and we're in an era of repetitive emergency. So yeah, please do get in touch. That's how I'd like to end. Thank you.
That was great, Shaleen. Thank you so much for this presentation. Same procedure as before. I'm gonna take a look around the audience. Gibt es schon Fragen, die ihr an Shaleen richten möchtet? Gibt es Sachen, die euch interessieren, wo ihr noch ein bisschen mehr Infos haben möchtet, aus Birmingham oder vielleicht auch von den anderen Städten, die sie beraten hat? I'm just looking in the audience, they're very shy. But if they cannot come up with a question, I wanted to ask again, or I wanted to ask, so in Birmingham, the start of working around food policy was within the public health department, right?
Yes, and that's quite, let me think actually. Is it common? It was in the case for the West Midlands. So the West Midlands region, which is a number of local authorities, public health took the lead on food policy. My best friend, who's also a food policy advisor, who originally worked in the West Midlands, has moved to Brighton. and she sits within the economy department. So I think different departments take the lead in, food policy.
That's what I was going towards, because also here in Germany we see that different departments take the lead, and sometimes it's a bit difficult to get them together as well. Or if one department takes the lead, then the others feel even less responsible, maybe. Although we know that food is crossing departments and.
Yeah. So is it worth mentioning that Milan, which I think is incredible. So obviously Milan is incredible. They've really invested in food policy, but they now have their own food policy department that reports directly to the mayor, and it's not part of any other department. It's a cross-cutting, or maybe it's under one department, but it has a really significant role within the council.
Yeah, I think that's also similar to New York, right? Because they also have the food policy office that reports directly to the mayor's office.
Mayor, yeah, 100%.
Maybe, that's the goal. Maybe, we don't know. We will discuss this later. I'm going to look again into the audience. We do have some questions. It's the yeah. You guys, you came prepared. I love it. We start here. Thank you. It was great to hear about Birmingham and the work that you've done. Quite inspiring, I must say. I read in the slide when you were showing the timeline of the council itself that somewhere in 2017, if I'm not mistaken, you got the commitment from the public, from the government. And I was wondering, I mean, there are various ways, policy advocacy, constant, haggling officers, or just finding one who's actually motivated themselves and find something of interest in the council. I was wondering, what was it that was successful for Birmingham to actually get their interest?
Okay, so I think that engaging with international platforms excites politicians, and in our case we took our cabinet member for health and well-being, who was the person that was leading like obesity related strategy, to India with us, and that led to her learning more about food strategy. It was exciting for her. I mean politicians are like this. They want a platform, they want to be able to meet people, they want to be able to raise their profile, and that's what international platforms do. And she was an incredible woman to work with, and what she did was witness cities stepping up, and politicians like the mayor of New York, who was also on a Netflix series recently, saying, oh my gosh, we've got to take this seriously, and even though our governments don't expect us to because we're not required, we're going to do it because this is important to our people. And hearing that made her think, gosh, this is what I want to do. And what was really exciting about Councillor Paulette Hamilton is that she really supported us and then started making demands. So made demands on the city having a food strategy, the city having a food team. And this was during the pandemic. So it wasn't like, okay, you can have a breather because you're having to deal with a pandemic emergency. We want this strategy by the end of the year because now we realize we need it more than ever. She's actually an MP now, a member of parliament. And the other incredible thing about her is that she was Jamaican heritage, and she really got the challenges that diverse communities faced. So for us, for me, it was very motivational and inspirational. But it's also exciting to hear that you're a researcher from India. So get in touch afterwards, because we worked a lot with the Indian government.
She's nodding. I already took the microphone away from her, but she's nodding and giving a thumbs up.
Good.
Here we have a second question.
Yeah, here Lydia again from the district, Charlotte-Mecklenburg. I have a question, and I would like to hear your opinion, because when we speak about food strategies or politics, then we have to speak about the producers too. And I don't know how is the situation in Birmingham or England, but here in Germany, we had the last few months huge protests by the producers, by the farmers, sorry. And
Sure.
with your experience with your countries or cities, I'm just asking, what do you think about this issue?
So it's really because I'm supporting 11 cities across Europe, and I was in Warsaw, so I was there on the day of a protest in Warsaw, and then Indian heritage. My family have a farming background in India, and you heard about the world's largest farmers' protest in India. I personally, even though I know that they're challenging some of the things they're being asked to do, which are favorable for the environment, I see this as an opportunity for dialogue. Food systems transformation is complex and hard, and it's not easy. But I think that there's this real opportunity for dialogue. And one of the cities, Groningen, in the Food Trails project, emphasized that that's what they feel. So they're in the Netherlands and also faced farmers' protests. So Birmingham and is surrounded, I don't know if any of you've been to Birmingham, but it's surrounded by rural area. And there's a real disconnect. So we don't have strong relationships with our rural areas. And as you've probably heard from or read yourselves or understand, city dwellers often don't know, and our children don't know where food comes from. However, I think it's pretty easy to engage with farmers if the will is there and the desire is there. And so through these work streams that the food strategy has been, there are 6 work streams. One of them is around food sourcing and food production, and that's the opportunity for the cities to engage farmers. And so some of my friends are part of networks of farming communities, and I've introduced them to the city. And let's see what happens. But yeah, we have to be proactive and we have to continue even if it's difficult.
Thank you. And I'm getting the red flag that we're out of time. Thank you so much, Shaleen, and thank you also for sharing your contact details. I'm sure that people will get in touch with you because there's so much more to share on and to discuss further.
Thank you.